to have in one particular calendar financial year, would you enter into a hedge against that entire anticipated expenditure to lock in that expenditure for that particular year, that particular price? And basically, if your head entity was Canadian and you did it in a Canadian hedge, well, fair enough, but one would have expected one to have locked in that in 1 year. You wouldn't sort of go through the year trying to play the market, if you like, trying to speculate whether or not you can get a better result than what you have. It's not really hedging, I wouldn't have thought, in that particular case. It's more like speculation. But anyway, so that's the first point. The second point is that as they were hedging, they seemed to have accumulated far greater hedging expenditure or derivatives, if you like, or hedge instruments than what was actually underlying they were hedging. So, and that was another thing. Now, I understand that they could have been anticipating out further than that, but I think we understand it was just particularly for that particular year. So,
that'd be concerning, obviously.
So
so from what you said, they are one general comment, right? One way to think of hedging is, and one approach to hedging is what I call fairly simple and very spot on, exact matching of your risk to the hedge instrument. So in this case, gosh, I would say I'm not used to saying capital dollars, but let's say it's expense dollars or revenue dollars being tied to the currency where the risk is in the months that it occurs. A more sophisticated approach that's quite common is what I call managed hedges, where you're taking a greater level, if you will, of you may not be managing precisely all that volume. You would be doing something less than that volume, probably not more than that volume very often. And you might be managing the risk not precisely over the entire period that that the expenditures or earnings are being affected, rather focusing it more narrowly in months of greater liquidity because you understand the relationship between that month and the months that you're hedging. So that's what you call more of a managed hedge position. Now, I agree with your comment or your worry that the more managed nuances that you put into a hedging program, it starts feeling more like speculation. And I guess what I would say, those were 3 data points along a continuum to where, it's kind of an artful call as to whether something, you get into where it's clearly speculative trading, where there is no underlying risk, even named. You're purely investing in those instruments, trying to buy low, sell high. But normally, if someone's calling it a hedging program, it's somewhere along this continuum where it's an artful call as to whether or not they're undertaking speculative behavior. But if they're doing a managed hedge program, even a sophisticated managed hedge program, perhaps especially in a sophisticated managed hedge program, there should be studies in place and justification in place as to all of these moves. And one broader topic that's more related to, we got into this talking about the why you would risk more, why you would put on a greater hedge position than your underlying risk. Let me make this comment and then ask a concern from what you'd said. A big tenet of many of the things that you're talking about is the correlation study between the hedge instrument and the risk, right? So to the extent there's a mismatch in using Canadian instrument to cover Australian dollars, or quite frankly using gold to cover Australian dollars or any other instrument, what needs to be studied and justified to the accountants is a correlation study that shows that whatever instrument you're using, it is highly correlated. And it is possible that in order to hedge Australian dollars, let's say, it could be that the risk has higher correlation with gold than it does actually trading the currency. And so one If there's greater